I looked at my son-in-law sitting at my kitchen table, in my house, eating food I paid for, and I realized he had just told me to stop talking. Not in those words. He said, "We've heard this before, Walter. Except my name isn't Walter." And they hadn't heard it before. I hadn't even finished the sentence. My daughter didn't look up from her phone. I sat there for a moment, just sat there. I'd built that table myself 31 years ago, from a kit I ordered out of a catalog when my wife was pregnant with our daughter. I remember sanding the edges so she wouldn't splinter herself on it as a toddler. I thought about that. Then I pushed back my chair, stood up, picked up my keys from the hook by the door, the same hook I'd put up in 1987, and I walked out. They didn't follow me. I don't think they even noticed I was gone until I didn't come back for dinner. Let me back up. My name is Howard. I'm 67 years old. I spent 34 years as an electrician, owned my own small contracting business for the last 12 of those, sold it when I turned 62 for enough money to live quietly and comfortably for the rest of my life. My wife, Loretta, God, she was something, passed 4 years ago from pancreatic cancer. 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end, I was with her every single day. After she passed, my daughter Renee called from Denver every Sunday. She worried about me rattling around in our house in Beaumont, Texas. She asked if I was eating. She sent me crossword puzzle books because she remembered I liked them. She flew down for Christmas that first year, and we cried together at the kitchen table, and she held my hand and told me she loved me. I thought we were close. I believe that. I wasn't wrong about those years. She met her husband Crispin, and yes, that's his real name. His mother is from Connecticut and thought it was distinguished. About 8 years ago, he sold commercial real estate. He wore sport coats on the weekend. He had strong opinions about wine and expressed them unprompted. I kept my thoughts to myself because he made my daughter smile, and that mattered more to me than his opinions about Cabernet. They got married in Sedona. I paid for the wedding. Not all of it. They covered some, but the venue, the catering, and the honeymoon in Costa Rica, that was me. Somewhere around $48,000. I didn't mind. Loretta would have wanted it. I told myself that, and I meant it. The trouble started slowly. It always does. About 2 years after Loretta passed, Renee called and mentioned they were thinking about buying a house. Denver prices had gotten brutal. Crispin's commission income was inconsistent, her word, and they'd had a hard time qualifying for the loan they wanted. Would I consider co-signing? I said I'd think about it. I talked to my buddy Gene, a retired accountant I'd known for 20 years, and he told me not to do it. You put your name on someone else's loan, you own their problems, he said. He wasn't wrong. I called Renee back and explained as gently as I could that I wasn't comfortable co-signing, but I offered to give them $30,000 toward the down payment instead, no strings attached. She thanked me. She cried a little. Crispin sent a text that said, "Really appreciate it, Howard." No punctuation. I noticed that. They bought the house. A nice place in Aurora, 4 bedrooms, big yard. I visited that Thanksgiving and I slept in the guest room, and it was fine. It was good even. I played with their dog, a goofy yellow lab named Biscuit, and Renee made her mother's cornbread stuffing, and for a few hours it felt like everything was still okay. Then, about a year later, Crispin's commercial real estate business went through what he called a restructuring. In plain English, he lost his 2 biggest clients and his income got cut by more than half. Renee was working as a dental hygienist. Steady job, good hours, but it wasn't enough to cover their mortgage comfortably on its own. Renee called on a Tuesday, not Sunday. I should have noticed that. She asked if they could move in with me temporarily, just to get back on our feet. She said it would probably be 6 months, maybe a year at the most. She said Crispin was already talking to a new firm. She said she missed Texas, missed being near me, missed having family close. I said yes. I said yes because she was my daughter. I said yes because my house had 4 bedrooms and I was alone in it. I said yes because I still heard Loretta's voice, sometimes saying, "You're too stubborn, Howard. You push people away." Except my name still isn't Howard. I'm just borrowing it, and I didn't want to be the kind of man who turned his daughter away when she needed him. They arrived in March with a moving truck, Biscuit, and 17 boxes that Crispin labeled office supplies. I helped carry boxes. I made chili. I told them my house was their house. I shouldn't have said that last part. That was a mistake. The first few months were fine. Renee helped with the grocery shopping. Biscuit kept me company. Crispin was out a lot, networking, he said, and I gave him credit for trying. I stayed out of their way. I ate breakfast early before they were up, took my walks, did my crosswords, called Jean on Thursdays. It started shifting around month 4. Small things first. Renee mentioned that Biscuit needed a yard area, so could we move the garden bed by the back fence? I'd built that garden bed for Loretta. She grew tomatoes in it. I didn't say that. I just said I'd rather keep it where it was. Renee said, Okay, it's just a suggestion. But I saw her look at Crispin, a kind of look that meant we'll revisit this. They revisited it. 2 weeks later, while I was at Jean's playing cards, someone moved the garden bed. I stood in my backyard and looked at where it had been. The dirt still showed the outline. I didn't say anything that night. I went inside and I ate my dinner and I watched the news. But I started paying closer attention. Crispin started having what he called client meetings at my house. The dining room table where I used to eat alone with my newspaper became a staging area for his laptop and folders and branded coffee cups from some investment group I'd never heard of. I'd come in to make a sandwich and he'd give me this look, just a look, not a word, that made me feel like a guest in my own kitchen. Renee changed the Wi-Fi password without telling me. When I asked, she said the old one was too easy to guess. She gave me the new one eventually, but there was something in the pause before she did it, a hesitation I felt in my chest. Month 7, they started talking about making the house more functional. Crispin thought the garage could be converted into an office space. My garage, where I kept my tools, my workbench, the old truck Loretta and I drove to the Grand Canyon in 2003. He said the truck wasn't really being used, and maybe I should consider selling it. I said I'd consider it. That was a lie. I had no intention of selling that truck. Renee brought it up again the following week at dinner, and that was the first time I noticed Crispin's tone had changed. He didn't suggest anymore. He explained. He explained to me, in my own house, at my own table, why the truck was an unnecessary expense, why the garage space was underutilized, why at my age I probably wasn't going to be doing much more hauling anyway. He talked to me the way you talk to someone whose agreement you don't actually need. I put my fork down and looked at him. I'm not selling the truck, I said. He smiled. Of course, just thinking out loud. But I saw the look he gave Renee, and I saw that she almost nodded back. That was the moment I understood that something had changed, not just in this house, in them, in the way they thought about me. I was no longer Renee's father who needed looking after. I was an asset to be managed. I called Jean the next morning, not on Thursday. I called him on a Wednesday, which tells you how much sleep I got that night. Jean listened. He didn't say, I told you so, which is why we've been friends for 20 years. He asked me one question. What does your estate look like right now? I told him. He said, you need to talk to a lawyer. I did. I drove to a law firm in Beaumont, not the one my accountant used, a different one, someone with no prior connection to anyone in my life, and I sat across from an estate attorney named Abbott and I told him everything. He had one of those faces that doesn't react, just listens. When I finished, he said, let me ask you something. Is your daughter on any of your accounts? Your deed? Anything? Wasn't. That was the one thing I hadn't changed. He said, good. Let's keep it that way. And let me show you some options. Over the next 3 weeks, quietly, I set up a revocable living trust. I moved my assets into it. My investment accounts, my savings, my house, all of it into the trust. Abbott explained that this meant my estate would avoid probate, that I retained full control during my lifetime, and that I could name whoever I chose as beneficiaries. I could change that at any time. I named a small number of charities. I named my neighbor Dolores, a 74-year-old widow who'd brought me casseroles for a month after Loretta died. I left a specific amount, generous but not everything, to Renee, with the condition that it be distributed in installments over 5 years, managed by the trust, not accessible in a lump sum. Crispin was not mentioned anywhere. I didn't tell anyone. I drove home, made myself a grilled cheese, and watched a Rockets game. The conversation at dinner happened 3 weeks later. I was telling a story, nothing significant, something about a job I'd done years ago, an electrical panel in a restaurant downtown that kept tripping, funny the way it resolved. And Crispin said, we've heard this before, flat, dismissive, like I was a TV in the background that had been on too long. My daughter said nothing. She scrolled her phone. I sat for a moment. I thought about Loretta. I thought about the table I'd built. I thought about the garden bed that wasn't where I'd put it. I thought about the truck he wanted to sell. I got up. I took my keys. I drove to Gene's house and knocked on his door at 7:45 in the evening. His wife Carla answered in her bathrobe and looked at me and said, "I'll put the coffee on." Gene and I sat at his kitchen table until almost midnight. I told him I was done. He nodded. He asked what I needed. I said I needed about 4 weeks. Here is what happened in those 4 weeks. I called Abbott and finalized everything in the trust. I opened a new checking account at a credit union across town. Not the bank where I'd banked for 30 years. A different one. No connection. I redirected my Social Security and my investment withdrawals to the new account. The old account I left open with a small balance, enough to look normal. I started looking at apartments. Not in Beaumont. I'd been thinking about San Antonio for a while. Loretta and I always liked it there, the river walk, the way it felt like a city that hadn't forgotten how to slow down. I found a 2-bedroom in a complex near Alamo Heights. Quiet building, mostly retirees. I paid first, last, and deposit in cash, and I signed the lease under my own name, and I didn't tell a soul except Gene. I arranged for my mail to be forwarded starting on a specific date. I quietly moved the things that mattered. Loretta's photos, her rings, some of my tools, the documents, to Gene's house in my truck over 3 separate Saturdays. I told Renee I was helping Gene clean out his attic. She didn't ask any questions. She was on her phone. The day I left, I made sure Biscuit had water. I am not heartless. I wrote a letter, not an angry letter. I want to be clear about that. I wrote something calm and exact. I told Renee that I loved her, that I had loved her every single day of her life, and that nothing would change that. I told her that the house would be on the market within 30 days. I had already spoken to a realtor, already had a number in mind. I told her they would need to make other arrangements. I told her that I wished Crispin well in his career, and that I hoped in time he would treat people with more care. I told her the truck was going with me. I left the letter on the kitchen table, under the salt shaker, where she would see it when she came down for coffee. I drove away at 6:15 in the morning before anyone was awake. Biscuit barked once from somewhere in the back of the house. That was the only goodbye. My phone started ringing around 9. I was already past Houston. I let it go to voicemail. All of them. Renee called 11 times. Crispin called twice. I noted that he waited until after Renee had already tried, and then once more from a number I didn't recognize, which I assume was a friend's phone. I didn't answer any of them. I stopped at a diner outside of Seguin and ordered eggs and coffee, and I sat by the window and watched the highway, and I didn't feel angry. I want to say that clearly. I didn't feel triumphant, exactly. I felt the way I used to feel at the end of a big job, when all the wiring was right, the panel was clean, everything was running the way it was supposed to. Quiet. Correct. The house sold in 3 weeks. My realtor, a no-nonsense woman named Bev who had sold us the house back in 1989, told me she had multiple offers and did I want to see them. I told her to take the best one. She did. I never went back. Renee called Gene eventually. He told me she was upset, that she felt I'd disappeared, that she couldn't believe I would do this. Gene said what he said, which was that he wasn't in a position to give her information about my whereabouts. She called him selfish. He told her politely that she might want to think carefully about who had been selfish in this situation. He's a good man, Gene. About 6 weeks after I left, Renee sent me a long email. It took me 2 days to read it. I won't repeat most of it here, because some of it was things a daughter says to her father when she's scared and ashamed and wants someone else to be responsible for how she feels. But buried in the middle, there was this. I didn't know Crispin was making you feel that way. I should have been paying more attention. That was the closest she came to it, to the real thing. I read that sentence 4 times. I wrote back, short. I told her I appreciated her saying that. I told her I was safe and well. I told her I would be in touch when I was ready. I meant it. I live in San Antonio now. My apartment looks out over a courtyard with a big pecan tree. I have my workbench in the spare bedroom, a setup Gene helped me arrange when he and Carla came to visit. I've taken up volunteering at a trade school on Tuesday mornings, teaching the basics of residential electrical work to kids who remind me of who I was at 22. One of them, a serious young man named Abernathy, truly, that's his name, and he owns it with complete confidence. Already knows more about 3-phase systems than I did at 30. I think about Loretta. I think about the early years, when we had nothing and it was enough. I think about the garden bed and how I should have spoken up about it the same day. I think about Renee. I think about the little girl who used to fall asleep against my shoulder during long car rides, and about the woman who scrolled her phone while her husband erased me in small, consistent ways. And I hold those two truths at the same time, because that's what you do when you love someone. You hold the whole thing. She called on my birthday in November, I answered. We talked for 40 minutes, she cried. I didn't. Not then. I did later after we hung up, sitting by the window with the pecan tree going gold outside. She told me Crispin had moved out, that things had not been good between them for a long time, that she'd been too scared to look at it clearly. She didn't ask me for anything. She just talked. Before we hung up, she said, "Dad, I'm sorry." 2 words. She didn't over-explain them or qualify them or add conditions. She just said them and let them sit there. I told her I loved her. I meant it the same way I always had. The way doesn't change just because people do. She's coming to San Antonio in the spring. She asked if she could see the apartment. I told her yes. I already bought a new coffee maker, one of the nicer ones, because she likes good coffee and some things shouldn't change just because others have. I still have the truck. Loretta's St. Christopher medal is still hanging from the mirror, where she put it in 1999, and where it will stay until one of us rusts out completely. Some mornings I drive out before the city wakes up, and I take the old highway south, and I watch the sun come up over the flat land, and I think about how much road there still is. There is quite a lot of it. I am not done.